True love can be a gift, but what happens when it turns into the ultimate betrayal? This is the story of a woman who made the biggest sacrifice for the man she loved, only to be repaid in the most heartbreaking way. She gave her husband a second chance at life, donating her own kidney to save him. But instead of gratitude, she was met with deceit. Once he recovered, he left her for another woman. The pain of his betrayal was unbearable, but what followed next took an even darker turn. Was it desperation? Was it revenge? Or was it something more sinister? The love that once saved a life would soon lead to something tragic. This story will make you question trust, loyalty, and the lengths people will go when love turns into betrayal. Stay with me till the end, because this is a story you won't forget. The woman's name was Claire. She had always been there for her husband, Ethan, through thick and thin. Their marriage wasn't perfect, but it was built on years of shared memories and love. Ethan had been battling kidney failure for months, and doctors had told him he might not make it without a transplant. Without hesitation, Claire stepped forward. She was his wife, and this was her chance to save him. She underwent surgery, all while praying that everything would turn out fine. And it did. Ethan recovered, and for a brief moment, everything seemed normal again. But as the weeks passed, Claire started to notice something. Ethan was distant, barely home. He started going out more and spending less time with her. And then one day, it happened. He came home, his bags packed, and told her he was leaving for another woman. Claire was crushed, confused, and heartbroken. Claire sat there in silence, her heart racing. She couldn't understand how Ethan could do this to her. She had given him everything, her body, her love, her time. And for what? To watch him walk away into the arms of someone else. The pain was suffocating. She questioned herself constantly. Was she not enough? Was her sacrifice not worth it? Days turned into weeks, and the reality of her new life started sinking in. Claire had no choice but to go on, but her world felt shattered. Meanwhile, Ethan seemed to thrive, completely absorbed in his new relationship. He was free, healthy, and happy, and he wasted no time enjoying it. Claire couldn't escape the bitterness that filled her every time she saw him out with his mistress. It was almost like she didn't matter anymore. The hardest part was seeing how little remorse he showed. It wasn't just a divorce. It was a betrayal on a level she couldn't quite put into words. But Claire's feelings of powerlessness slowly turned into something darker, something she wasn't proud of, but couldn't ignore: anger. She started to question what Ethan truly deserved. Would he ever understand the depth of what she had done for him? Or had he become so wrapped up in his new life that nothing else mattered? Claire's life spiraled further into isolation. Friends tried to console her, but the void left by Ethan's departure couldn't be filled by kind words. It became clear to her that she couldn't just let go of the past, not after what he had done. Her thoughts grew darker, more intense. Was it wrong to think he deserved to suffer? Claire didn't know, but something inside of her was starting to change, something she couldn't control. As the months dragged on, Claire's thoughts grew darker with each passing day. The anger, the bitterness, it all started to consume her. She couldn't shake the image of Ethan and his new girlfriend, living their life without a care in the world. Meanwhile, she was left to pick up the pieces of a broken heart and a shattered sense of self. Claire's mind became a battlefield, torn between the memories of the man she had once loved and the cruel reality of the man he had become. She found herself driving past his house at night, watching from a distance, wondering if he was happy. Sometimes she would sit in her car, staring at the windows, waiting for some sign of remorse, some indication that he understood the gravity of what she had sacrificed for him. But nothing ever came. Then, one evening, Claire received a call. It was Ethan. He sounded distant, but there was something in his voice that made her stomach twist. "We need to talk," he said, before hanging up abruptly. Claire's heart raced. Was he coming back to apologize? Had he finally realized the enormity of his actions? The hope that had been buried deep inside her began to surface. She met him at a small cafe, her hands trembling as she waited. When he walked in, it was as though nothing had changed. except now, the man who had once been her everything was a stranger. Ethan looked at her with an unreadable expression, and Claire could feel a tension building between them. He took a seat across from her, the silence stretching until he finally spoke. "I've been thinking a lot, Claire, about everything." Her breath caught. Was he finally going to admit the truth? She held her breath, waiting for the words that could change everything. But what he said next made her stomach drop. "I've realized that I made a mistake," he said. "But I can't go back. I've moved on." It was like a slap in the face. Claire's chest tightened. The anger she had been holding back for so long began to rise, hot and suffocating. She fought to keep her composure, but the words felt like daggers. "You really have no shame, do you?" she whispered. Ethan looked down, avoiding her gaze. For a moment, Claire saw a flicker of guilt, but it was gone just as quickly as it had appeared. She knew then that he would never understand. That all of her sacrifice, her pain, had been for nothing. Claire stood up abruptly, her heart pounding in her ears. She wanted to scream, to throw everything on the table, but instead she simply walked out. As she stepped into the cold night air, the weight of the conversation hung heavy in her chest. She had to make a decision now. Something had broken inside of her. She had done everything for Ethan, and this was how he repaid her. Claire wasn't sure how far she was willing to go, but she knew she couldn't let him walk away without facing the consequences of his betrayal. The next few days passed in a blur for Claire. Her thoughts were clouded, her mind constantly replaying the conversation with Ethan. She couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted inside her, a line crossed that she could never uncross. The anger, the betrayal, and the overwhelming sense of abandonment she didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I know what you've been hiding," she said, her voice steady but full of rage. "I know about the money, the lies, everything." Ethan's face paled, his eyes darting nervously. For a moment, Claire saw something in his expression: guilt, fear, maybe even a hint of regret. But before he could respond, Veronica appeared behind him in the doorway. She looked shaken, almost scared. "You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "Ethan, he's in too deep. He can't get out." Claire's breath caught. "What do you mean? What's going on?" she demanded, the tension building. Veronica hesitated, then finally spoke. "He's been involved in some illegal dealings, money laundering, threats, worse than that. I didn't know what I was getting into," she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "But when I realized what he was really like, I tried to back out. I tried to warn you, Claire. I thought you deserved to know the truth before." Suddenly, the door slammed open behind them, and two men barged in. Claire barely had time to react before one of them grabbed her by the arm, pulling her roughly inside. "Ethan, we need to talk," one of them growled. Ethan's eyes widened, and Claire saw panic flash across his face. "They know, don't they?" he muttered under his breath. I thought I could fix it." One of the men sneered. "You're in deep now, Ethan. There's no going back." The other man turned to Claire, his gaze cold. "And you're a liability." Claire's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the danger, the weight of everything that was happening. Ethan, the man she had once loved, was tangled in something dark and dangerous, and now it was too late for anyone to get out clean. Before Claire could even think of a way to escape, there was a loud crash, and the two men were suddenly thrown to the ground. Claire's eyes widened as a third figure emerged from the shadows: Veronica. She had a gun in her hand. "Run," Veronica said urgently, her voice filled with panic. "Just go. Get out of here now." Claire didn't question her. She ran out the door, her heart racing. As she reached her car, she looked back once more, seeing Veronica and Ethan standing in the doorway, the chaos still unfolding.